What's up, nerds? My name is Brennan, the nerd of many faces, and to my right is Shane at FDScosplay, and we are the Knights of Nerd. Now, Shane, May the 4th is 2 days away at time of recording, and that day holds a very special place in many Star Wars fans, as it is May the 4th be with you, and then following that is Revenge of the 5th, or if you're just a Mandalorian fan, this is the May. So, of course, you and I have a very dear friend, Lee Kohse. He's with us again to talk what it is that is important about that day to us. And so let's go ahead and let's get into it, because I have a feeling that this might be another long Star Wars episode.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. You know, we can talk Star Wars all day long, all week long, for hours on end. Yeah.
All right. So here we go. And hello again, Lee. How are you doing?
Hopefully, audible.
Well, yes. The technical difficulties have been addressed. I can hear you crystal clear.
Unfortunately, you can also see me. So, but yeah, I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing better. Had the second dose of the super soldier serum last week, and knocked me out for a few days. But you know, I'm back and I'm alive and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I got my 2 microchips, so I'm good. I am fully G5 capable now.
Nice.
All right. So
and Bill Gates can see where I'm at any time.
So I have a question for you guys, because May the 4th, I didn't really realize that was a thing until I had moved to Southern California. I didn't realize that May the 4th, the 5th, had such a large impact, or like large relevance in terms of Star Wars. Do you guys like know how that got started, or you know when that started to come about?
Shane, you want to take that, or?
May the 4th, like, to me, it was never really May the 4th, like, was Star Wars Day. It was always May 20, was it 20?
The 25th.
25th. Yeah. You know, when the first Star Wars came out, that was always Star Wars Day. And then May the 4th kicked in. Oh, God. It's been a long time now, but, I mean, it just kind of came out of nowhere from my recollection. There wasn't... I don't remember if they're like in San Francisco, if they were like, today will now be known as May the 4th Star Wars Day or whatever. But I mean, it makes sense. So here we go. So I brought it up. So it hasn't always been around. It was the first May the 4th be with you was in 2011.
Wow. So this is a fairly recent development.
Yes,
sort of, because that's why I was looking down a minute ago, was because I wanted to refresh my memory on it. But the original origin of the term "May the 4th be with you" was actually when Margaret Thatcher was elected as prime minister. Like the London Evening Post or some article or some newspaper basically said in the article, you know, making fun of Star Wars and talking about Margaret Thatcher, basically said, "May the 4th be with you, Maggie."
Yeah.
And, so that was actually the first use of the term, and then fans kind of like took it and just said "May the 4th be with you" as just kind of a verbal greeting on May 4th. That was kind of just a kind of ha ha he he kind of thing for years. But yeah, when it first started getting organized was around 2010, 2011 was when they started doing. I think 2011, like Shane said, was the first like big fan organized event. And then of course after Disney bought them, they've been encouraging it.
Yep. It's like a Hallmark holiday now.
Yeah. What's funny though is it's actually I think it's the first movie holiday kind of. So because now there's Aliens Day,
Yeah, and we just had that this week. Was it this week or last week?
I worked on that too. So, so I like very frequently I'll start getting pinged on Alien Day because of some of the Alien work I do.
Nice.
Although I'll admit my first Alien project was Alien AVP Requiem, so Alien vs Predator Requiem.
Nice. Nice. So yeah. So I mean, so
got some fun stories about that one.
I bet, considering it's like AVP Requiem wasn't the best received Alien versus Predator movie out there.
Sad thing is I think the original edit of it that I saw was so, like, even in my style guide and the stuff that I have, there's that scene where the alien jumps on top of the girl and she's got the shotgun and she shoots it in the head while it's above her.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, like, the acid blood just falls on her head and melts away. Well, it's super, super dark. And also, that's the other thing, by the way, is that whole movie's really, really dark. They did that to hide the gore.
Yeah.
So the gore that everybody really wanted is there. And for whatever reason, the studio decided to tone it down by just making everything dark and hard to see. And in that scene in particular, if I remember correctly, the original edit that I saw, like, you watched her screaming as her flesh melts away, as like her, the fat in her fat tissue in her face melts away, the muscle, and she's still screaming and yelling as she's melting away in layer after layer after layer, and then her head just dissolves into this gargling thing as the skull kind of melts into the cement. It was graphic and it was horrific, and you're just like, oh my god, that was awesome, but it was terrifying to watch, and it was just like that was. And then we watched it in the movie theater, and it was all like, well, that's not what I remember seeing in the original, but I think it was also toned down because I don't remember. Would that one have an R rating on it, or did
it did? It did.
Okay. Yeah, but I think it may have been one of those things where they got an X rating or something because the violence and gore was just a little too much. And then they kept it in some of the places where it was kind of like and got rid of it in the places where it was like really freaky. So. But I can definitely imagine that particular scene being one that they took out to try and preserve the rating.
Well, was AVP Requiem the one where the Predator alien goes into the maternity ward?
Hybrid, yeah.
Yeah, I'll say it's like that scene kind of disturbed me a little bit. But it's like we can talk aliens on another episode. But
Yep.
Okay, so we've established the origins of May the 4th. Now let's go through and discuss, like, I mean, to me, it's now just like, okay, it's a fun, cheeky greeting. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And I'll go through and watch Star Wars on that day. I mean, thankfully, May the 4th falls on a Tuesday. It's like on a night that I stream. So I'm probably going to go through and find like a Star Wars game and probably stream that because it's going to be fun. I might do, I like, you know, KOTOR or something like that and have backseat gaming allowed. So that way it's like people are like, do this, take this person.
I still think that and I will fight you to the grave so far that Nintendo 64 has the coolest Star Wars games. I have my Nintendo 64, but my kid stole it. So I actually have to go into his room if I ever want to play my Star Wars games.
I think because Rogue Squadron came out for the N64, right? Or was that GameCube?
Nope.
Rogue Squadron.
Yep.
Okay.
On the N64.
Yes, it's like I will say that Rogue Squadron was one of the finest flight sim games out there for Star Wars. For me, it's like, for me, one of my first favorites was X-Wing versus well, actually it was TIE Fighter for flight sims, and I enjoy the
I have that one too. I don't know the number. I've got a stack of probably like 12, 13 inches tall of Nintendo 64 games that are just Star Wars. There was a lot. It was fun.
And yeah, I think my first Star Wars game was Dark Forces on the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm. That's one
of
my favorites.
Love that game.
That's also that game. 64.
Yeah.
So you know, like for me, it's a fun cheeky greeting in which it's like on a day that in which I will watch Star Wars, like I said. So like, what does it mean for you guys?
A lot. A tiring day for me now. Back in the day, it used to be, you know, like you having a Star Wars marathon, but now, you know, being in the 501st, you know, it's trying to do as many events in one day as you possibly can, and it usually breaks down to around 4 or 5 events in one day, starting my day usually up in Oceanside and finishing my day all the way down in La Mesa. So it's changed for me over the years, just because it's got, you know, being part of the 501st and, you know, being Kylo Ren, it's kind of taken on a different significance for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's given me a chance to do charity events on that day, which I love to do, and that's why, you know, I do what I do at the 501st. So before then, 5-6 years ago, it was all about sitting and getting up as early as I possibly could, and then start on episode 1 and finish the night around 9 o'clock watching Return of the Jedi. And now it's let's see how many events I can do in one day and how many costumes I can do it in, and let's break records, because, you know, right now it's, I think Todd, my buddy Todd, and I hold the record for most events in one day for May the 4th, and I think we did 4, but we did a total of, yeah, this was on a weekend, so it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We ended up doing, I think it was like 12 events, 10 or 12 events in 3 days.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's a lot of fun, because I mean, you've got Revenge of the 5th the day after, and so, you know, you get some cool events after that on that day too as well.
Make
So
sure it's
it's
fun weekend too if they fall on Saturday and Sunday, or even Friday and Saturday.
Well, most of the time too, it's crazy because our busiest days are the years where it falls on Free Comic Book Day. So you have, you know, May the 4th on Free Comic Book Day, and you're just like, oh God, here we go. And
those are usually my best Free Comic Book days.
Yeah, those are crazy, just crazy with events and stuff like that, and it's a lot of fun. But I mean, primarily, I mean, I get my kids, you know, to do it with me. So not last year, but the year before last, I drug Fox around with me for 2 or 3 events. Year before with this costume.
With the Star Wars costume.
Yep, he was in his Poe Dameron, and then I've drug Rory around with me a few times in her Jedi, and yeah, it's just fun. It's just become.
I never see her in her Jedi. I think I may have seen her only in it like once.
She grew out of it, so we're working on a new one.
I can see that.
Yep. So she's got one that I bought her, the same one that I have, and we're gonna mod it to fit her properly. So yeah.
And then for me, it's I get called up a lot to basically sit at those events that Kylo Ren and whatnot are walking around in. I'll just be sitting there, and you know, it's thankfully after a while of working with the 501st, you learn the various cosplayers and their gait, as well as like some of the subtle nuances of like even their TK armor, their stormtrooper armor, or just, you know, their scouts, you know, their scout armor or something like that. You start to notice subtle nuances, like there might be a scuff, or especially if they have like a you know, sand trooper or something like that. But you start noticing just the way the armor fits on them, the way they walk, things like that. And so somebody will walk up to you in a full costume and you'll be like, "Hey, Shane," and then people are looking at you like, how do you know which one that is? There's 3 Kylos here. It's all like, he's the tallest, the screen accurate one.
It's like he's the tallest, and also he comes and whispers sweet nothings in my ear in his Kylo voice.
That too. Instead of give me the map, he's like, "Do you want a donut?"
Because
well, good.
It's, I mean, one of the things that I was going through and I was interested in, and I was trying to see in terms of like time lengths of movies. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. There's over 22. There's over a day's worth just in the movies alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's episode 1 through 9, right?
Episodes 1 through episodes 1 through 9, and also including
And
Solo,
And Solo.
Solo, and Rogue One.
Yeah.
Ladder picture too. So that one's a long movie.
Yeah.
So that really is. It's like you can usually use the restroom between movies or grab a snack, something like that. Episode 9, that's the one where you're kind of like, I kind of wish I had a catheter.
Yeah.
It's just so long.
Yeah. Well, Solo, if I remember right, Solo's the shortest Star Wars movie out there. I think it clocks in under 2 hours.
Solo clocks in at 2 hours and 14 minutes and 45 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, it's the shortest one because they generally go for about 2.5.
No, the shortest one actually goes to Star Wars: A New Hope. At
episode 4.
Episode 4. It's 2 hours and 4 minutes and 44 seconds.
Huh.
I love it. So only because you mentioned Solo, I really think that movie gets such a bad rap.
It does. It's such a good movie. It really is.
One of my favorites, especially like of the Disney era. It's actually my second favorite Disney movie of the Star Wars ones. And I just, there are things I wish they had done differently, obviously. But I really hate, and I always forget how to pronounce the dude's name, but the actor who played Han Solo, I thought he did an amazing job because like, you're never going to find somebody who looks like Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
That's just, I honestly think that it's unrealistic expectations for people to think that you need to cast people who look identical. Because I hate that they would supersede your looks versus your acting ability. Because, like I remember people, good example is actually X-Men. When people threw a conniption fit that Hugh Jackman got cast as Wolverine because
he's too tall.
He's 6'2" and not 5'4" or whatever, 5'6". That Wolverine's supposed to be in the comics. So people actually got mad that Wolverine is like, oh, he's too tall. He's not my Wolverine. And then of course he does a really good job, and people are like, oh, well, maybe, but then he's now, God, what was it? Him and Patrick Stewart, I think, hold the record for the longest amount of time that an actor has played a single character, 16 years, something like that.
And the gentleman who you're thinking of, Lee, is Alden Ehrenreich.
Yeah, I always screw up his name, so
well, his last name is kind of weird because it's Ehrenreich. So,
but his acting though, like honestly,
no, his acting is fantastic.
He had the swagger, he had the personality. It's like even the way he like held his blaster and stuff like that, it was bang on. It's like if you just actually lose yourself in the movie, it's a really fun movie, and and he just does an amazing job. And I hated that people like slammed him because he didn't look like young Harrison Ford. And it's all like, young Harrison Ford was lucky to look like young Harrison Ford.
Right.
And it's because you have to look at something like as an artist, we have to like break down people into very subjective shapes and features, and there's actually rules of beauty. And one of those is symmetry. So if you look at somebody like Zoe Saldana or Marilyn Monroe, they have these remarkably, stunningly symmetrical faces, and that's one of the reasons why they were so gorgeous. In the case of Zoe Saldana, it's still gorgeous, but yeah, that's why they're so attractive, is because the human brain loves symmetry, and they have this absolute like perfect symmetry to them that makes them so appealing to such a broad audience to even just look at long before they open their mouth or start acting or doing anything. There's already this instant connection to them, and that's just human psychology. Harrison Ford, on the other hand, he's got a nose that shifts to the left. He's got scars on his face. It's just kind of like the way his eyes and the way his nose are set in particular. His face, by technical definition, violates all those rules on the beauty of symmetry. And yet he's still a stunningly good-looking dude.
It just throws everything out the window.
Right.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's like he's one of the hardest people for me to draw because, in particular, his nose veers left, and most people don't realize that when they look at him, because there is this there is this cockiness to him, and there is this like there's self-confidence and things like, and so his body language supersedes his physicality, and or his physical being, I should say, and because his physicality actually is incorporated in that body language, and that's part of what you know, what was his name again?
Aldrin.
Alden.
Alden.
I keep on calling him by his last name though, but it's because
Ehrenreich.
Alden, you know, he nailed it. He did just like everything. Like just he had the swagger, he had the attitude. You know, he kind of like the sly smirk and everything, the self confidence, and it's all like, I don't know why everybody was bitching.
Yeah, I thought him and Donald Glover, Donald Glover. I almost called him Danny Glover.
It's like,
Oh,
no,
wrong Glover.
I thought they both had really great chemistry as Han and Lando. Like they were great.
And the other thing is I think the other reason that people bash on Alden so much is because Donald Glover was so amazing as Lando. Yeah, it was just those two together. Just like Lando just ate up the scenery, like everything he was in. He kind of stole the show, and I think that was, I don't want to say a detriment to the movie, but it was something that people could point at and say, why can't he be more like that guy who's just bang on, you know, doing a really good Billy D. Williams? And it's like, it's don't take away from Alden's work. It's I don't know. So I really think that movie gets a bum rap, and I hate that because it was, I personally, it's like one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and it was preceded by one of my least favorites. And we talked about that in the last episode as far as just storytelling and things like that, because as a storyteller, that's what's important. We should definitely do an episode one of these days where we just talk about Han Solo, the movie, because I have, like, there's things I really love about it, and there's also things I wish they had done about it. I think probably the biggest thing was one of my friends, my friend Ari, actually came up to me and said, the biggest problem he had was it focused too much on Han Solo and Chewbacca. He's like, I don't care about Han Solo and Chewbacca. I know what happens to them. I've seen them in the other movies. We know that in this prequel, they're going to survive. There's no risk. There's no nothing. You know, so
there are no stakes to the character.
Exactly. Whereas with, you know, and you know that even though Chewbacca tries to eat him, it's going to come out okay.
They're going to be friends.
Exactly.
Right.
And, you know, they're going to be BFFs. But you do hit this point where it's like you did have, you know, Kira, and you had, you know, Beckett and stuff like that. It's like, those are characters we really should have fleshed out a lot more. So that you could see through those characters' experience, Han Solo's experience with those characters, you see where he goes from being, you know, kind of a street kid who's kind of like a do-gooder street kid at that, but you know, love struck and whatnot, and then he has his heart broken, and the guy that he idolizes kind of betrays him. Right. And so, but by had they fleshed out those characters more, those moments would have been more impactful in the story, and therefore the movie probably would have been much better. But, you know, but also, you know, and we can go into the production of the story too, but the production of the movie was also kind of, it had its hangups as well.
So you mentioned a couple of things that kind of bring me to a question that I wanted to ask both of you while recording, so I can get your most honest reactions. And I think we're to that.
Should I take a drink so I can spit take?
I mean, if you want. So my question is, with everything that has come out since the first three episodes, 4, 5, and 6, and also taking into consideration that Disney does like to bring some stuff back and update it, what are your guys' thoughts on
live action Star Wars?
Well, no, not a live action Star Wars, but like a retelling of this, an updating of the story of 4, 5, and 6.
I am very much against it.
Okay.
I think from the standpoint of storytelling, Disney bought Star Wars because it had a solid fan base and solid properties behind it.
Okay.
That's the whole reason. That's the whole reason they bought Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
Was, you know, they wanted something, you know, because that's actually, by the way, that goes back to John Carter. So one of the reasons the John Carter movie was essentially just abandoned. Disney had the rights to do all those Edgar Rice Burroughs books. And we can go into the marketing and the horrible marketing and stuff like that, where they actually didn't name it the same as the book.
Yeah.
It was just called John Carter, and people were like, well, who's he? Why should I go see a movie about him?
Yeah.
Whereas John Carter of Mars, you're kind of like, well, that sounds cool.
Or the Princess of, it's like, because it's based off the Princess of Mars book series by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and it's like the Princess of Mars. It's like, okay, automatically cool, interstellar Disney princess, awesome.
Well, you know why they changed the name on that though, right?
No.
Because they had all those movies like Red Planet and
okay.
It was another movie, something Mars, that tanked at the theater just before while John Carter was in production.
Ghost of Mars?
I think it was Ghost of Mars, something like that. So yeah.
But those are all horror flicks, and not, it's like, I mean, completely and totally different like genre.
But marketing people don't think like that. They think, oh my god, this thing had that thing with a lot of blue on it didn't work. Take out all the blue, and that's literally how they think. And this is why I battle with marketing people so much, because they don't take human psychology into it, or the fact that people actually want, you know, they want familiarity, and that's why remakes do well. Because there's a certain level of familiarity to it.
Okay.
But that's why the Disney live action versions of their animated movies work well. Is because there is a level of familiarity, and they're really not updating the story much. They're pretty much telling you the exact same story.
Yeah.
That was told, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, depending on the film, but in a new style. And in that live action, higher resolution. In the case of Lion King, more animated.
Yeah, it's like, I don't understand why they called that a live action movie, but they did. Shane, it's like, I kind of want to get, it's like, I do want to get your standpoint on this, and then I will go through and like give my defense of, or give the reasoning why I had this idea, because I will admit, in like thinking of, it's like, for stuff of this episode, I spent most of last night not sleeping and watching Star Wars.
Nice. No, I'm right there with Lee. Like, I don't leave what you have movie wise alone. Don't try and redo episode 4, 5, and 6, 1, 2, 3. Just leave that, or even 7, 8, 9. Leave that saga alone, right?
Okay.
If you want to do something to expand those stories, and per se, let's do a series along the lines of like the Clone Wars, and take my favorite Star Wars novel, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, which is basically takes place between Empire and Return of the Jedi.
But unfortunately, you can't do that now.
Why not?
Because
you can tell that story, even though it's Legends. I mean, a lot of the characters that they're bringing into the Mandalorian are Legends, so you can retell that story your way. But they're kind of already doing that to a certain extent in the comic books with the Star Wars comic book that they've got going on right now. That's basically telling the story of Luke, Leia, Lando, and all of them, and it's actually a really, really good series. If you guys haven't read it yet, it's just Star Wars. The first couple books is Luke going back to Cloud City to find his hand and his lightsaber. Well, not his hand, but to find his lightsaber.
Basically, it's Luke's going back to Cloud City to fill a plot hole.
Right. Yeah. Find his lightsaber. But it's a really good book. But I would like to, I'd love to see something. I'd still love to see the story of Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, Lando, and all that stuff. But if you're gonna do it, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing it, like I said, in the style of like the Clone Wars. You know,
Yeah.
you had all three. You had the movies, and then you had the Clone Wars series, which is phenomenal. Probably some of the best Star Wars television out there.
Oh yeah.
Even, I mean, as much as everybody loves the Mandalorian, I still think the Clone Wars is a better series than the Mandalorian, just from the storytelling aspect of it and stuff like that. And I would love to see something like that. But don't try and rewrite the story of the characters for your sake. Leave what's original. I mean, I know George released his special editions to basically tell the story that he wanted to tell, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of ruined what, I mean, we've already kind of had that, and it kind of ruined what we loved already.
I think
You know?
well, the thing is like a lot of the stuff that George did in the special editions and things was he had ideas at the time,
Right.
that, technologically they were unable to execute, or there were things that they executed and it didn't look as good as he wanted. So you know, I think two good examples that I'll use would be Mos Eisley's and Cloud City.
Yeah.
And Mos Eisley, you know, in the background, he filled in all kinds of cool stuff, and you know, he got to flesh out the city a little bit more, so it looked a little bit more like a spaceport, and more like, you know, it was the main city of Tatooine, kind of thing. And so it has a little more of that feel. The problem is, and he also reanimated things, like, so there was the oh boy, some of the creatures in the background.
The Brontosaurus.
Well, not the Brontosaurus. I was thinking more like right outside the cantina.
Oh, the Dewbacks.
The Dewbacks. Yeah.
There's a Dewback there that they CG'd in.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually because the original Dewback was basically a rigid like sculpture of a rhino or something, and then like it had the Dewback head, and all it did was it had a guy in it who kind of like could make it move left a little bit. And so George wanted it to be more animated, like more, you know, he wanted to see it shifting and twitching and stuff like that. And
make a sound.
That stuff I sort of understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that makes sense. But when you have things like the Brontosaurus thing, or, you know, throwing the Jawas off, or the two robots, you know, doing the little slapstick, you know, comedy, that they animate and things like that, I think a lot of those extra things that he threw in just to kind of add character took away from the scene, because the scene was supposed to be a more, no more wretched hive of scum and villainy. And then suddenly you see just this, you know, it looks like an episode of the Three Stooges. You know,
well, and then it's like
a Brontosaurus, you got robots just going totally Moe and Curly on each other.
Yeah.
And so so I think it kind of takes away from that scum and villainy, you know, wretched hive aspect.
Well, and then also it's like you can go even, it's like you can go even to Return of the Jedi and still get that. I mean, I disagree with the throwing in of a musical number in Return of the Jedi, because you're in Jabba's palace and it's like, okay, it's
not be light and whimsical.
Yeah, and throwing that in there was kind of sort of, and I'm like, so here is the.
Well, I was gonna say also really fast though.
Go ahead.
The other comparison I wanted to make was Cloud City.
Yeah.
And Cloud City was this really claustrophobic, closed off set.
Yeah, there were no windows.
Yeah.
There were no windows because they couldn't pull it off. Or they didn't have the budget, because you would have had to put glass there and then hire somebody to do big map paintings behind it.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the time and stuff to do that, or the budget. And then of course, when he finally had the ability to redo it in CG, he was also able to warm up the temperature, so change the lighting temperature of the room, and whatnot. And I really think that Cloud City is a prime example, because he didn't add Brontosauruses and Jawas and robots beating the crap out of each other and whatnot. It was just the exact same thing you saw, but it was just more refined so that it suited the story better.
Right. Yeah.
That to me is the critical part. Is it's got to suit the story. Brontosaurus, Jawas, robots beating each other, not suiting the story of wretched hive of scum and villainy. But Cloud City looking airy and expansive and, you know, and warm and inviting. Yeah. And then suddenly becomes more threatening as the Empire takes over. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. No, out of all the special editions, you know, the Empire is the one that I can that I can watch without going, what the hell did they do? Because I mean, all they really did, I mean, like you said, I mean, they cleaned up Cloud City, they cleaned up, you know, a lot of the technical issues that they had with, you know, when you're in the snow speeder, you can see the outside, you know, the see-through cockpit and stuff like that. So they kind of cleaned that up, and then they added a really cool scene with Luke and the Wampa being in the cave, and you only ever saw Luke cut off the Wampa's arm, but you never saw anything, and it was kind of cool to see him cut the arm off the Wampa, and then all of a sudden the Wampa sitting there going, "You son of a gun! You cut off my arm!"
Well, it's like, it's like the thing is, because in the original version of Empire, it's like you saw the Wampa's face, but that was a puppet. It's like that was someone going rah.
Yeah,
and that was it. It's like there was an element of like menacing sounds, but we didn't get to see what that menacing sound was coming from. And it's like I agree with you. It's like I agree with you both in terms of like Empire of the special editions being the best one out of all three, because it
added to it and didn't take away from it.
It's added to it and didn't take away from it. Now, in terms of the reason why I'm asking the question of going back and redoing episodes 4, 5, and 6,
is you want to anger the fan base. Actually, really fast. The reason I keep looking to the side and laughing is there is a raccoon on my roof looking through my window, judging me. And that's why I keep kind of giggling, is because he's just sitting there like watching me, like, yeah, you talk too much.
So, but of course, it's like, so in terms of how I watch Star Wars now, in terms of how I watch it's like I do the same thing that I do with the Avengers movies. I start from, if I'm in the mood to watch a specific Avengers movie, I will go watch that specific Avengers movie, or Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the same thing with Star Wars. But if I just feel like I'm gonna watch Star Wars, I tend to start at the beginning. So last night I got through Solo, I got through Rogue One, and Rogue One introduces Vader in such a fantastic way, of him showcasing his lightsaber skills and his powers and everything else, that we get to feel how badass Vader is.
Can I just point out how that scene really upset me to a certain extent?
Well,
why is that?
The fact that okay, we already know that in A New Hope, Vader's chest box does not light up. It doesn't light up until Empire and all that stuff. But in A New Hope, and even in Rogue One, his belt, his boxes blink off and on, and the lights go on. In that scene, he had no lights on his belt, and that really, really drove me crazy. It's because, you know, I'm a
Vader is your daddy. Vader is your daddy.
Vader is my character. I love Vader.
You are a Vader.
I'm a Vader groupie, okay? And that just as much as the scene was amazing and beautiful and stuff like that, and I understand why they did that, just for the dramatics of the red lightsaber and the light and stuff like that. God, guys, please, you're killing me, dude. That's part of his life support. You just killed him. Thank you. Go away now.
But then it's like, but then I started watching it but then I went into A New Hope. And I got to the scene between Vader and Obi-Wan.
Okay.
And I kind of felt disappointed.
Did you ever see the fan edit of that?
Oh my god!
Yes, the
so
fan.
amazing.
Yeah, the fan. It's like the fan edit of that fight scene. Amazing. It's like, and so part of me is posing this question, because could we possibly get something like the fan edit in that movie if it was made with today's technology, with today's stunt crew, with like, I mean,
but
with
you're talking between like a special edition then.
Yes.
Okay,
a super duper edition.
You were talking about like redoing, like doing a reboot.
Well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah, honestly, I say leave it as is. And me personally, it's just it still comes down to, we understand Sir Alec Guinness, was not really of the spry, youthful, type.
Yeah, I mean, he
had David Prowse been told, okay, go beast mode in this, so it's really believable, would have beat that poor man to death.
Yeah.
With those sticks in the film. That so. Because remember, the lightsabers were basically the hilt with a
wooden dowel on top of it. Yeah, no,
they were just beating the crap out of him. And but that look to, I'm thinking the prequels, when I guess they upgraded it to aluminum. But look at some of the lightsabers, because Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor were just like, they were going at it with each other. And at the end of the day, they turned in their lightsabers and the blades like all that. Because they were just like, and it was amazing. They got really good fight scenes that way, especially the Darth Maul fight scene was brilliant because it also had so much story behind it.
Yeah.
But I think that, in the case of A New Hope, it would be cool. But my biggest fear was, if they do that, what else are they going to change?
Right.
Well, I mean, I have a few things. It's like, if you guys wouldn't mind like hearing them.
I'll groan, but go ahead. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
create new characters. It's more work for me.
Well, a scene between, it's like, throwing back in the scene between Biggs and Luke.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that we're introduced to Biggs so late that it seems that his death is almost meaningless.
All right. Well, if I remember right, I mean, Lee, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the original novel for New Hope, isn't there a scene between Biggs and Luke before Biggs leaves for the rebellion?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
There is
in the deleted scenes on the Blu-rays that came.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
There's also that scene where they're hanging out just as Biggs is about to take off and join them.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And Luke's kind of like, gosh, I wish I could go with you. And, but, and then later on, does, but.
Well, and then the whole entire thing of like, Biggs saying, Luke is the best pilot in the Bush territories. We don't get it's like, we don't have an example of that. We don't know how good of a pilot Luke already is.
Right.
And so
I mean, he takes out Womp Rats in his T-16 back home,
which we don't see.
I don't think we need to see that, but I do agree that some kind of interaction with Biggs and Luke would be cool. I do think that sort of adds to the story.
Because then also it makes it like, it would make us feel for Luke in that he just lost his best. It's like he lost his best friend. It's like this relationship between Biggs and Luke is. I mean, granted, suspension of disbelief and everything taken aside for a minute here, we are expected to believe that they are friends, that they have an existing relationship, and yes, there is some amount of we have to accept that.
I was to say that we're not going to get to see some of that in the new Obi-Wan series.
I mean, maybe that would be a great. It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi checking in on young Luke Skywalker here. It's like here and now and then. It's like, and he's Luke says, it's like, wait up, Biggs, or wait up, Tank.
I want to see a 9-year-old Luke Skywalker that they deep fake Mark Hamill's face onto.
That would be great.
And then just have. Mark Hamill now voice the character. And not even make an effort to sound young.
And there was one of the things that I'm like, I kind of had an issue with this scene in A New Hope, but then I'm like, oh, now it kind of makes sense upon further reflection. I didn't quite understand the the trash compactor monster, the Dianoga, I think it's what it's called.
Yeah.
You know, it's there for 1 minute, then it's not there, and then it seems like it's meant to just scare Chewbacca, so that way Han fires his blaster into the trash compactor again, so that way, you know, it's like, wait, they'll hear, becomes relevant. It's like it's, you know, it wasn't until that I'm like, oh wait, yeah, the Dianoga incident is kind of necessary, but I mean, maybe more of the Dianoga would be kind of cool to kind of raise the stakes a little bit, because it's like, okay, you see the eyeball, you see one tentacle, and then that's it.
Personally, again, okay with the situation they had.
Yeah.
And you know, and it mostly comes down to the Dianoga gets complicated the more you know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why was it there? How is this space station that was just built and just gone online have some kind of like wild creature in it when it was built in space?
Yeah.
You start to have to explain. The more you give of that creature, you're gonna have to give it more backstory, and after a while, it's gonna contradict itself.
Well,
So I think that just leaving it at that like maybe, maybe some Ugnaught brought it as a pet, and it got too big, and his mom flushed it down the toilet, and that's how it ended up.
Right.
Mom goes, I have spoken.
Yeah, right.
Pretty much. And so it's like, you know what, I'm good with that. I'll give, that's my backstory, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like,
I don't need more of the Dianoga.
Again, it's like this was me going through and like having these late night thoughts of, well, like, wait, how does this work? How does this work? I mean,
yeah, but what I'm saying is, by adding more of the Dianoga, I think you're actually taking away from the Dianoga.
or
Because
well,
you now have to almost do, you would basically almost have to do an entire vignette of just the Dianoga and his backstory, because that was one of the great things about Star Wars, is everything looks beat up, everything looks used, of course, except for the Empire stuff, because it's new. But there was a backstory behind all of that, and that was, by the way, another thing I loved about Solo, when they explained the giant gap in the front of the Millennium Falcon, was there used to be an escape pod there.
Yeah.
And I like a luxury escape pod, and I just kind of like that. Oh, that was kind of cool. I thought that was kind of fun. Even things like the radar dish keeps changing. Why? Because he keeps breaking the damn. Like it's this thing that just sticks up, and and we've seen that Han has an experience of, he loves going sideways through spots that he barely fits through, and that poor radar dish just never fits. Yeah. So, but it's, to me, it's things that you are doing that add to the overall story. Perfect. And that's why something like bringing Biggs in early on in the movie builds up that experience with Biggs at the end of the movie, and also why Luke is, and also I would like to see Luke a little bit more, or be affected a little bit more by Biggs' death.
Yeah.
So I think that, that would definitely be a worthy inclusion. But adding something that's just kind of like a side, goof kind of thing, like the Dianoga, I think it comes down to, you're distracting.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why they didn't put Tom Bombadil in the Lord of the Rings movies, because he really didn't have anything to do with Frodo's adventure.
Okay.
He was a side quest, and had they brought him in, it would have distracted from the overall story.
Right.
And I think that's what you risk when you start expanding things. Just kind of cool. Now, that's not to say doing a vignette, or, because remember, MCU did these wonderful things, especially in Phase 1, where they did these little like mini movies.
The Adventures of Coulson.
The one shots, yeah.
Yeah.
So they did the whole, a funny thing happened on the way to New Mexico, or a funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer, or whatever it was. But that one where he's in the liquor store and beats the crap out of the guys, that was brilliant. That was amazing, and I really like that. So doing a vignette like that kind of fills that backstory, and that's sticking it on Disney Plus, please do it.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. So you do also Star Trek. Star Trek has these Star Trek shorts, Star Trek treks, whatever they're called. But
I think they're called. I think it's just called short treks.
Short treks, yeah. So they have. I don't currently have Paramount. I will here soon. But well, I'm frugal, so it's like I'm not gonna watch 20 different online services. So I canceled HBO because there's nothing, on HBO in the next few months until Dune comes out that I want to watch.
Yep.
Ooh.
So I canceled Dune until October, I think, and so now we're firing up Netflix, and we'll probably fire up Netflix and Paramount Plus. So definitely Paramount Plus, maybe Netflix, but yeah. And then I'll watch that, and then when I start running out of things to watch on those, I'll cancel those and go start up HBO again.
It's like for Netflix for me, it's that it's going to be on May 13th, Castlevania.
Oh, I can't wait for that.
Oh, but yeah, but Star Trek had these great things where they had like the tardigrade, showing how this tardigrade from Discovery was cruising through the mycelial network, and it kept popping up in places with like throughout Star Trek's history. And so you see things like you see the Enterprise, from fighting episodes, or well, I'm trying to remember which episodes. But anyway, but you see the tardigrade appear on the Enterprise prior to some major event that happened in like the TV show, and then later on it comes out and it does this other thing, and it ends up on the Enterprise, and then when it reappears on the Enterprise, it's now just, I think, before Khan, or before it blows up trying to take out Khan. And so, but it's constantly, but it's going through the entire timeline of Star Wars. This one poor creature is just trapped, kind of, his story is basically told around all these other adventures in Star Trek. And then see those Star Trek episodes or moments in Star Trek reimagined as these really slick animated little shorts was really cool. And even if you're not into the tardigrade story, it was just kind of fun to see that stuff and see like old school Kirk and old school Spock and stuff cruising around. So I really like them. So I think doing vignettes like that of Star Wars and sticking them up on Disney Plus, I'm 100% for it.
Okay. No, I mean,
and it's not intrusive to the movie.
Nope.
The movie is still there. The movie is still, to those of us, sacred. And then, but sacrosanct. But it you keep it preserved for the fan base, but you can still add that backstory in the form of those little animated vignettes or even live action vignettes. Even maybe hire those fans that did the Death Star edit to redo that, or to actually do that using authorized footage. So
right. Yeah.
Well,
they kind of did something kind of like that, I guess you can say. They told the stories of the female characters of Star Wars, and little shorts. I think they started it when they did start. Oh, it was before Disney Plus. It was primarily an online thing, and then they brought it over to Disney Plus, and it was like different side stories of like Ahsoka or Rey or Leia or oh crap, who else was in there? I mean, it was a lot of different characters that they did, and they were actually pretty good, and it tied into some of the movies and stuff like that. Like there was an episode on like Endor during Return of the Jedi, and just kind of different things and stuff like that. So it'd be kind of cool to see them to kind of expand on that a little bit and tell those stories.
I mean, it's like, and don't get me wrong. It's like I did not propose this question saying it's like, hey, it's like this is crap. It's like, it's more of like, well, this has been something that has been done before. I mean, we've seen reboots with Star Trek, and that has worked out amazingly well.
You're talking about the special effects reimagining?
Re-edit,
or basically, I'm trying to think, the remastering, the remastered special effects in Star Trek, the original series.
No, not the original series. I'm talking about the movies where it's like.
Are we talking about J.J. Abrams?
Yeah, and his it's like his lens.
Lens flare, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the lens flare cinematic that is Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing on that.
I was gonna say with lens flare really fast. I really wanted in God, episode 7, Force Awakens. I really wanted a scene where when Han Solo comes on and he takes over, they do some maneuver or whatever. There's a whole boatload of lens flare and whatnot, and they go, polarize the shield, polarize the shield. Oh, thank God. I so wanted something like that where they just make fun of the fact that there's so much lens flare in JJ's movies.
Yeah.
But you could polarize your the windshield basically. You could polarize the shield, or you could polarize the cockpit windows or something. And basically, just polarize it. Glare goes away. No more lens flare, and just kind of make it a silly kind of one-off goof, but it's also functional. and then you don't have to worry about lens flare ever again in that show.
All right. No, like I mean,
problem solved and its story.
Right. See, I'm not. You both know I'm not a Star Trek guy. I've tried watching it, getting into it, and I just can't. I'm sorry. I'm Star Wars through and through. You know, I'm a Wars guy. Yeah, but the JJ movies, the Star Trek movies, I enjoyed those. I thought those were entertaining. I liked them a lot more than the originals, than Star Trek and Star Trek Generations and stuff like that. So, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm a special effects whore, I guess. I don't know. but
Star Trek Generations to me was kind of weak. It had a lot of cool potential, but I'm hoping it gets some redemption here shortly, because if you remember the timeline, it was like every 30 years or whatever, this ribbon cruises through the galaxy.
Oh yeah.
It's been about that amount of time. So with sometime in Picard, hopefully we run into that energy ribbon.
Well, I mean, in season 2, we get Whoopi Goldberg back as her character from Next Gen. They're talking about bringing back Q, so it might have those two characters be talking about the energy ribbon through space. I mean, it would make sense to me.
I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever. Okay.
I was like, that's Star Trek. I want to focus more on Star Wars. But yeah, I sidetracked us. Sorry, I have ADD, so it's like,
no, you're
it's
good.
Fine. It's fine.
But and we're sort of like sci-fi ADD, so it's just all like King Kong versus Godzilla, yay, Star Wars,
Squirrel.
Star Wars is my shiny squirrel.
Yes.
So, I guess the question now is like, what is coming up next in the Star Wars universe?
Freaking Bad Batch, dude.
Bad Batch?
Holy shit, that's gonna be amazing.
Okay.
Yep, Bad Batch starts on May the 4th on Disney Plus, and it's going to be amazing.
I'm trying to talk my kid into. He's now he's almost 18, so he turns 18 June 4th, and I'm really hoping. I'm sitting there like, hey, remember when you were a little kid and Clone Wars was coming out? We would wake up early on Saturday morning and watch cartoons. And we'd watch the Clone Wars together, and he's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "You want to do that again with the Bad Batch?" And he's like,
"No,"
because he's a teenager, so it's kind of like, eh. And I'm like, "God damn it!" But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Whether or not my kid actually, gives me that slight brief nostalgic moment again.
That's all right, Lee. I'll take over Juan's role, and I'll get up early in the morning to watch Bad Batch with you, bud.
We just fire up Discord, have a watch party.
I was gonna be like, I volunteer as tribute for this too.
I love everything Dave Filoni has touched.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So, and that includes the oblongs. People forget he worked on that. So before he worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender, he worked on the oblongs, and that show got canceled, but it wasn't his fault. That was just, I think, honestly, ABC just didn't know what the hell they had.
No.
Which seems to be the trend with most animated things. But Dave Filoni, he went and just hit it out of the park on Avatar: The Last Airbender. George Lucas saw the stuff he was doing there and was all like, we need to get this guy on Star Wars.
Yeah.
And to work on my Clone Wars project, and just kind of handed him. He's like, just and the great thing is like the relationship they had was essentially George kept out of it. It really was Dave Filoni doing everything on the Clone Wars for the most part. George obviously was still there, would give his input from time to time, but it was mostly they would sit down and have conversations over the theology of the various religions. Like how does it, like what is the light side, what is the dark side, what is their unifying concept? And so that's where you get the father, the son, and the daughter and stuff like that. So and kind of like the what's the like a lot of things, like what's Boba's relationship to the overall Mandalorians and stuff. So all that backstory for those characters that George had in his head, he would just sit there and over coffee, tea, just carry occasional writing meetings or stuff like that, having lunch with Dave. They would sit there and just talk about Star Wars nonstop. And but Dave would always just pick his brain, which, by the way, is why the Mandalorian is so amazing. And we talked about this on the last time I was on, but I always I don't want to say it irks me, but I do get bothered by it when I watch all these interviews and stuff, and everybody's all like, "Oh my God, Jon Favreau's doing such a great job."
Yeah.
It's like there's another guy in the room.
Yeah, even Jon Favreau is going, guys, it's co-creator.
Yeah.
There's another person who's been helping out. And and he's flat out said Dave Filoni is really kind of the glue that holds it all together, because Dave knows the history of Star Wars. He knows the history of Star Wars that was unpublished because he got it from George. It was those conversations. It was all those lunches and walks across Skywalker Ranch for no particular because like, we're going to this building, I'll go with you, and just chatting and hanging out and having conversations, and then incorporating all those stories that George had in his head into the stories for the Clone Wars. And then on top of that, there was also when Disney took over, and of course the Clone Wars was canceled originally. Disney then came in and we're like, well, the Clone Wars was doing really good. Let's do another one. Let's do Rebels, and we'll create newer characters, and we'll do another show that kind of takes place a little further in the future. And in the process of doing Rebels, of course, Disney had at that point killed the expanded universe. So things like earlier, the Shadows of the Empire was an amazing story, and it would be really cool to I want Prince Shizor sometime.
Oh God, please.
Like that would be really cool. Get me some Dark Sun stuff going on. So, show more of the underworld, which I'm hoping they can kind of do with the Mandalorian. But yeah, Dave has done this really great thing where he's like, well, if you guys aren't going to use those great characters from the expanded universe, I'm gonna. And so he brought in like Grand Admiral Thrawn, and of course he also created Ahsoka. But he's been pulling some of the stories and the content from the expanded universe, because also that's what happened. That's how Darth Maul came about.
Yeah,
is in the expanded universe. They talked about how there's this rumor that Darth Maul survived. People are like, no way, how could that possibly happen? And then he actually does appear, and so Dave Filoni was all like, ooh, we should animate that. And he created this beautiful story arc about how just his sheer hatred of Obi-Wan and the Jedi and the Sith, because he felt abandoned by Palpatine. Basically just his sheer hatred alone kept him alive long enough for him to actually repair himself and eventually build himself a new, lower body. But that was all stuff that was in the expanded universe that Dave Filoni would pick and kind of like, okay, well, let's stick it in here, or this storyline fits in here. There's really good characters here, and I'm hoping someday somebody gets around to the Yuzan Vong invasion, because those guys were badass.
Oh God, yeah, holy shit, that was such a great series, man. Holy crap! But if they do that, Han's got to be alive, because if you guys haven't read the books, spoiler notice right now, Chewbacca dies. That was one of the books that I read that I cried at the end of it, because Chewie basically repaid Han his life debt by giving his life to save his kids. I think it was Jaina and Anakin at the time. I think Jason was already good.
And by the way, the Yozan Vong and the Second Galactic Civil War are the primary reasons why they got rid of the expanded universe from a storytelling standpoint. Is when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they're like, okay, we want to tell more stories. So how many years has it been since Return of the Jedi? Oh, it's been what was it, 30 years or something? So
Yeah.
To tell the stories that take place 30 years forward, where are we in the expanded universe? It's like, oh, well, they're in the Second Galactic Civil War now.
Yeah.
And which is kind of where they pulled the First Order from. But there was this other thing going on where on the periphery there was an invasion by this alien race called the Yuzan Vong, and those guys were force proof. Essentially, they had something about their biology basically negated the force, and so force users couldn't affect them, couldn't do anything to them. And these guys were just absolute, just imagine Klingons that are immune to all your best weapons and all your magic. And it was just they basically just their sheer presence negated the force. And but yeah, it was just imagine these guys walk in and then suddenly Merlin loses all his powers. Is kind of how it would work. But it was such a cool storyline.
Yeah.
And
it was a great storyline because it had a lot of development for Han too, because after Chewie gave his life to save the kids, Han just went into this like really, really dark place. Like he became like this alcoholic and like really just went down this like rabbit hole where you're just like, damn, like Clay doesn't know where Han's at. He's like at some freaking, he's at a bar somewhere drinking his feelings and stuff. And dude, it's such a great freaking story and the story arc of it, because it really kind of showed the struggles Luke had become, even though at the time he was already a Jedi master and stuff like that. You really got to kind of see his struggles, trying to deal with that. And it really brought the kids forward, bringing Jaina, Jason and Anakin, forward to those stories, which basically led into a whole other story that we can get into where, Jason becomes the new Lord of the Sith and kills his brother Anakin, and then his sister and him fight. I mean, it's just, it's such an amazing storyline.
Yeah, that kind of makes me like, that takes me to like, I really wanted, I had really hoped that those were the stories they were going to pull from.
Yeah.
To tell episodes 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah.
I had really, really hoped that those are where they're going to go. But granted, I still like Kylo Ren, but to me it was kind of weird. It was.
He's standing right behind Shane, so be careful.
Why would you name your kid Ben when you never met the guy?
Well, that's what drives me crazy, because in oh crap! In
Dark Forces,
is it Dark? No, was it Dark Forces? I don't remember if it was a book or a comic book, but Luke and Mara had a kid, and they named him Ben.
Yeah, that was Dark Empire, I believe.
Okay, yeah. And so when they're like, yeah, Ben Solo, I was like, no,
that's not right.
That's his. No,
Ben Skywalker.
Yeah, like what the hell?
And that was the whole thing. Like I wanted. That's one of the. I think another reason that there was a lot of disappointment about Episode 8 was because I've had this conversation many times with my friend Tommy. He's the art director over at Harmony Gold, and I asked him like one time, what's the hardest part of your job? When we were rebooting Speed Racer at the time. And so I asked him like, what is the hardest part of your job doing something like this, or when you're trying to do new stories for something that's been around for so long? And he's like, the hardest part is fan expectations, because if you have a property that has been sitting idle for 20 or 30 years, that's plenty of time for fans to go through and start writing their own stories.
Yeah.
Or in the case of Star Wars, you had the expanded universe kind of kept it going. So there was all this great content that was out there and existed. And eventually what ends up happening is people start to get these really amazing, well-defined stories and characters, and and some of the fan fiction's not bad.
Yeah.
Like and some like you actually get to some really good concepts and stuff. And that's kind of what saved the TV show Supernatural for
Oh,
about
yeah.
5 or 6 years. Was they actually said at one point they ran out of ideas, so they started reading fan fiction.
Yep.
And the writers started pulling directly from fan fiction to write the new episodes of Supernatural. So it, had Disney done something like that, where they actually went through the expanded universe and did their resources, and like we were talking about a minute ago, just kind of pull from those resources and all those characters and those various storylines that are already known. And again, it goes back to the beginning of the conversation when we were talking about what people want is familiarity. They want something they're familiar with because they're comfortable with it. So they love Star Wars. They love Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. Now with the whole Sebastian Stan thing, people are starting to actually go, well, he does look a lot like him and he can act. So bonus points there. So maybe we should do, to which other people are like, isn't he like 6 feet tall? And Mark Hamill's like 5'5". I forgot.
Come on, dude. You can make hobbits look short on screen. You can do the same thing with Sebastian Stan.
But it gets expensive on a production schedule. But just it's like everybody else just is on boxes around Stan.
There you go. Lifts.
But,
just give them lifts in their shoes. They'll be fine.
There you go. But yeah, but you get to that point though where had they based like the whole problem with episode 8, in my opinion, was they had already established, even if you go with Ben Solo as opposed to Ben Skywalker, even if you go with Rey, even if you go with Finn and all the other characters and Poe Dameron and stuff, you could have easily have taken the episode 7 transition to episode 8, and that plot hole that they kind of left there about Rey being abandoned on the planet could have been something a bunch of us were talking one day, and it's all like, how cool would it be, before episode 8 came out, by the way, if Mara Jade actually realized that Snoke had sent whatever are the new Vindicators or whatnot, had sent people chasing her, basically, or hunting her down, because she betrayed the Emperor in the Dark Empire series. So she betrayed the Emperor and married Luke Skywalker. So now they're trying to hunt her down, but they don't know she's pregnant. So one day she gets up, she leaves. Luke gets all morbid, manic depressed, and goes into isolation, because he loves his wife, and this the love of his life is gone. But he doesn't know that she was pregnant, and she goes and hides out on these various backworld colonies. Eventually has a child, names her Rey, ends up on Jakku. They hide out for a few years, and then when she realizes that the trackers are getting really close, she leaves them with Simon Pegg and takes off. And take care of my baby. And so she takes off, and eventually maybe they kill her, maybe she actually escapes, but she's still not able to get back to Jakku to help Rey, or to try and save Rey, or basically reunite with her. And so you have this thing where here is this character who has the Skywalker bloodline, and one of the most powerful Force users, and the child of 2 very powerful Force users. Now there's this fantastic storyline that could have actually carried through to episode 9 of, and you bring in a beloved character from the expanded universe like Mara Jade.
Yeah.
And so you get that familiarity and stuff like that. But the problem, of course, they did was with episode 8 was when they abandoned, your parents were drunks, they were nobody. All the expectations, Snoke dies really easily, stuff like that. So he wasn't quite the badass we had hoped he was. He's actually tricked into dying. That's what it comes down to. So you really come down to the situation where the fans and the source material had so much better material and so much better story design than what was actually executed in canon. And I think that's where a lot of that animosity came from for episode 8, because the story was not as strong as what the fans had envisioned for themselves all those years. And the fans they had the expanded universe to create these fantastic stories like that could have had that could have actually fed off of episode 7 exactly as it is. You don't have to change anything, even going with Ben Solo and stuff like that, and not and not using Jaden and all the other characters escaping my head at the moment, but
Jason, Jaina, and Anakin.
Exactly. So you don't have to use all the kids and the twins and stuff.
Yeah.
So and I think that, so so that was the answer from Tommy. It was essentially, long story short, was when you create something that people have had 30 years to sit there and think in their head, what would I do? And then they start to develop these great, fantastic stories and elements, and then you don't execute something that's on par with what they had in their head, they immediately hate it.
Yeah.
And if you're bringing in just all new stuff constantly, and you're not giving them any level of familiarity, then you're isolating them even more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of where episode 8 really kind of disfranchised or dissociated itself from the audience, was because so much of it was new, so much of it was different, and then of course the story wasn't really cohesive with what had been done with episode 7.
Right.
So, but that's the problem anybody has with rebooting. When we did Speed Racer, one of the big things we did about that was we had the original TV show, which is very beloved.
Mm-hmm.
And then the movie came out, and we saw the movie, and it was like, what did they do wrong in the movie that really affected it? Well, first and foremost, there's a lot of backstory production wise that also affects the storytelling. So in the case of Speed Racer, there's a company that actually owned the rights to Speed Racer, and they licensed them to Warner Brothers. And then Warner Brothers was, of course, making this movie, and somewhere in the middle of production, they decided that the Mach 5 looked too much like the animated Mach 5. So therefore, they wanted a bigger share of the merchandising from the film. And it just sounds just a weird business thing. Like somebody was all like, well, I want more money for every die-cast car you sell, because your car looks so much like the Mach 5 from the animated series. So what did the network do? Or not the network, the studio do? They created the Mach 6.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mach 5 is now the family car that drives them around. So like, yeah, you can have a higher share of the Mach 5 thing, and then we're not going to make any toys based on it, because why would we give you a bigger share when we can crank out Mach 6 toys instead?
Yeah.
And that's really what ends up happening. Is so the Mach 5 kind of gets relegated to the family commuter car. It gets used in 1 or 2 big races, and then the hero car technically becomes the Mach 6. And the fans hated that because they wanted the Mach 5. So had that one person from the rights, the legal owner of the rights, not come in and said, we want more money for the merchandising, the original story they had probably would have centered more around the Mach 5. So you would have had that familiarity that people wanted. And they still could have done the Royalton Industries and things like that as well, and still got away with it. But the moment they killed, when I go to the conventions and stuff, and we have artwork and stuff on display, anything I have with the Mach 5 brings people to a standstill. If I have Speed Racer up there, they're like, oh, Speed Racer, that's cool. If you see the Mach 5, they go, wow! There's such significant difference in the reaction.
Yeah.
And, that same lesson can be applied to, like the work we did on Voltron. And then, of course, when we're sitting here just making up our own fan stuff for Star Wars, is, try to keep it familiar. And, especially if you're rebooting or re-envisioning. By the way, the Speed Racer stuff, another thing we did that I really wish Disney would do with Star Wars, is the original animated series. In the projects we were working on, those stayed canon. We didn't change them. We didn't reboot them. Our story was not a reboot. It was a continuation. We went through and we watched every episode of Speed Racer, and we took copious notes. And one of the biggest things we came up with was, with the exception of Captain Terror and the car acrobatic team, every single villain that appeared in Speed Racer appeared once. They were one and done episodes, move on, next character, next story. And so we're like, well, that's kind of weird. So we were like, what if we could tell a story where every single villain that appears against the racers was basically a mercenary or a lackey of Captain Terror and the car acrobatic team. The only characters that appeared more than once. They appeared twice, actually, but in a story for Speed Racer. And what if we developed the backstory as to what was the absolute hatred that Captain Terror had for the Racer family, and what are the origins of that? And so that was, by telling that story, we were then able to essentially fill all the plot holes in the animated series, which again was done in like the 50s and 60s for kids. So there was no continuation of the story. It was like, here's an episode, it's a standalone. Here's an episode, it's a standalone. And they never led into each other. And then we ended up writing all these other stories that interwove all those stories into one gigantic epic tale. And the fans loved it. It was so well received, and it did so well. I kind of bummed that, the, again, legal issues and stuff with rights holders of Speed Racer ensued, but that killed the project. But for the stuff that we did, a lot of people were just like, that was a great way to reboot a property, because you didn't throw away the stuff people loved. You found a way to create, I want a character that does this. Cool. So, in the case of, we'll think Star Wars, take that same logic. Dave Filoni said there one day, it's like, I need a big, major, badass villain. What do we have from, that people are familiar with? Well, we have all these characters that, have appeared in previous movies. It's like, nah, they won't work. Not for what we're trying to do. We need somebody who's like a big mystery, but they're really pulling all the strings in the background, but keeping a low profile, very intelligent. It's like, ooh, you know what? Grand Admiral Thrawn. He's from the expanded universe. We killed him. He's no longer canon. His character exists. He's totally available. And they bring him in. And so you get to that level of familiarity. And so anytime you're talking rebooting or, expanding a universe or something, really what you should do is, go through and, what are, like, I'm trying to think of like minor characters from Star Wars. So you can do things like in Jabba's palace, all those various bounty hunters and the people who are back there.
Yeah.
There's any number of stories that they can tell in The Mandalorian, or anybody who wasn't mowed down at the end of season 2, that may have been in that room still.
Yeah.
With Bib Fortuna, anybody could have potentially been, or can be fodder or character that they can bring back and do a TV show or a major series or something, or make them more integral into future stories. And you'd have that level of familiarity.
Yeah.
The only thing I ask is, please don't use the 6-breasted woman. As a young child, that was somewhat terrifying to me. Like me looking at my mom going, how does that work? So that made my mom uncomfortable. So yeah, don't do that. But lots of characters to tell stories about.
Yeah, tons of characters. Yeah, it's definitely going to be one of those things that, we could talk about it all day, but there's so many great characters that were either fan fiction or told in, what they call legends now, which was, the expanded universe, that I would love to see them bring in. I mean, it's just, there's too many, like really way too many. Like, I mean, one of my favorite stories, even though it's a youth book. I think it's like a really short novel. It's called The Glove of Darth Vader. And it's basically them trying to find Vader's glove from his hand being cut off at the Death Star 2.
Yep.
And them trying to find it so that way they can either reclone him or use some of that DNA to reclone the Emperor.
I think I've seen that one. I think I've actually read that one.
And it's a really great story, and it's got some really cool plot twists and stuff like that. I mean, the book's probably like maybe 100 pages.
Yeah, it's not
really,
thick.
really thin. No, and
Star Wars stories is actually Tag and Bink.
Oh my god, I love Tag and Bink. Oh my god.
Tag and Bink, for anybody who's not familiar with it, check out the Dark Horse comic books, which you can probably find as trade paperbacks from Marvel now. But it's Tag and Bink. Tag and Bink are dead, or I forgot what the other one was, but they literally did comic books where you had these two characters from the Resistance or from the Rebellion that have found a way to weave their way through every single major story.
Yep.
in the
And
film.
it's all comedic, which is great.
And it's brilliantly done. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think that again, it's it's they found it. Basically, they did exactly what we did with Captain Terra and the Car Acrobatic Team. It just took a couple of characters and just wove them through every other story.
Yeah,
but it was fun, and it's a riot.
It is hilarious. That would be great. I would love to see it. It'd just be funny just to see something like that, just to see them in the background or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like,
still,
hey.
One of my favorite images ever from Star Wars in any of the book covers is actually the one where Tag and Bink are the Emperor's guards. Like the Emperor, and he's like, "Guards, draw my bath," and they're just like, "Ah." So that's still one of my favorite images, because it's just it's like you have this menacing Palpatine, and just the idea of him telling his guards, "Go draw my bath."
Yeah.
And the guards are like, "I don't want to sponge him down." I do that.
The shit we read, no.
but it's brilliant storytelling. It
really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's so many great characters out there, and I just and hats off to Filoni. I mean, he brings them in such a great way. Like, he really, really does. I mean, the introduction of Thrawn in Rebels, and bringing back
there were no Force weasels though.
Grand Moff Tarkin, bringing back Tarkin in, and just really kind of tying it all in, and then bringing Vader back in, and then just the confrontation between Vader and Ahsoka, realizing who Vader is, and just, I mean, he's such a great storyteller and character developer. It's just it's great to know that he's got his pulse on not only Star Wars, but he's also got his pulse on the fandom and what makes us go ooh,
Well, I mean, so, I think it would be fair to say that Filoni is first and foremost a fan. I mean, would you say that it's like, I would pose that he is going through, and he is fortunate enough to create his own fan fiction that gets published out to the masses.
Yeah, he's the king of the fanboys. He really, really is. When it comes to Star Wars, he is literally the king of the fanboys with everything. Because, I mean, even when he tells the story of how he met George and just their relationship and stuff like that, and at one point he's like my father now. It's like, he's basically handed me the keys to the kingdom and was like, here, it's yours now. Mm-hmm. I've taught you everything that I can possibly teach you. Now go forth and show, do my bidding, and
very
very much, just, he was the apprentice and now he's the master, and it's as much as I don't want to get into the politics of Disney and Star Wars with Kathleen Kennedy and stuff like that, but I definitely think that they need to move on from Kathleen Kennedy and give Filoni the full reins of the Star Wars universe, and let him be the Kevin Feige of Star Wars.
I will say this, not to get into the politics too much, but I think that if Kathleen Kennedy just handled the administrative side of things, and they gave Dave Filoni the creative keys, so basically make Dave Filoni creative director overall, or would be chief creative officer of Lucasfilm, and now anything that comes out of Lucasfilm, him, and of course the story team. Because that's the other thing, is there's this group called the Story Team, who their purpose was originally created so that they can make sure that people aren't blowing up planets in one show that are being used in another one. So their goal was to maintain continuity and keep the story on a certain track. Unfortunately, that gets superseded when your position is here and somebody up here starts making those creative decisions that break the rules that these guys are there to try and enforce. Yeah, and there's nothing they can do about it. So but everybody on that team is wonderful and amazing people. And I think they also tend to get a bad rap when, anybody in the chain above them can basically say, well, let's go create another character or do something that is totally against that character's personality type, or against that even worse, that character's archetype. Because that's the thing about Star Wars, is it's always been very mythology based. So there are archetypal, characters in there that are supposed to behave a certain way or do a certain thing. That's their character type. But when they go outside that character type and they start doing things that, normally wouldn't be, something they would do, that again goes to the whole lacking of familiarity.
Right.
And that, I think that's most exampled with episode 8. But, and that's, again, it's one of my biggest problems with episode 8. I still think it's a beautiful film. I think it's one of the best looking Star Wars films ever made. But it breaks away from the story so much that it's hard for me to actually watch it.
Yeah.
Because it undoes everything in episode 7, and then episode 9 undoes everything in episode 8, and it's all like, ugh.
Now, if they're to reboot anything, maybe they can just reboot 7, 8, 9.
Yes, and I don't have a problem with them keeping the same actors.
Yeah.
I thought all the actors did a brilliant job. I thought they were amazing. They were.
Oh yeah.
I thought the thing I hated the most was, for me, was the way Poe Dameron was handled. Because when you saw, and even Finn, because when you first meet Poe Dameron, he is the rebellion's best fighter pilot. He is Billy Badass. He runs everything, and and then he's essentially just, he's demoted. He's kind of like relegated to being a side character, and then by episode 9, here's this guy who is supposed to be the biggest badass in the galaxy is now, as far as being a fighter pilot and his skills as a military officer, essentially, is now relegated to essentially complaining that Rey's not there by his side all the time, fighting with him. And it's like, well, you were doing just fine before you met her. So, what happened to that guy? And so that's one of the things that I hated, was I think that they really, they took this character that could have been amazing, and he should have been like the Han Solo swashbuckling character.
Yeah.
And I think and have him as a good guy would have been kind of fun. Maybe he's off. Maybe create him as morph him into more of a scoundrel pirate type character. It's essentially I'm thinking privateering from history. So the idea that somebody like Sir Francis Bacon or something, I'm going to go off and steal money from the Spanish to finance this. And so he's just out there raiding imperial shipments and stuff like that to supply the resistance. That would have been kind of cool.
Because he'd be the person. It's like if they went that direction with Finn, would make logical sense, considering that he's the one who knows, he knows how things go. He knows the operating system.
Yeah, it definitely was a huge miss with Finn, because you give this great kind of backstory with Finn in episode 7, and then all of a sudden you just kind of throw this character away, and you're like, okay, whatever. Well, we're gonna team you up with Rose, and you guys are gonna go off to this other planet to find some goo with the red plum bloom and and you're gonna go break into a vault.
We did kind of touch on this though on the last episode in terms of the problem with Poe and Finn, is that it didn't seem like they could. It's like whoever it was to make this decision. Okay, who is the Luke Skywalker character, and who is the Han Solo character?
Right.
I think that's just it. Is you don't have to have
those characters.
You don't have to have a 1-to-1 replacement.
Yeah.
And so I think that had you in the case of Han Solo, he was a pirate, and so he was a scoundrel, and so I like the idea that you could have had him, and he had swagger, but you definitely could have had him from the standpoint of he was essentially from the very beginning. We'll call him chaotic, neutral.
Yeah, chaotic neutral is Han Solo.
And then, but by the end of, by the time he dies, he's kind of chaotic good. Like, I didn't really like the fact that he went back to being a smuggler, per se, especially since apparently he was a bad smuggler.
Yeah.
He went from being one of the best to just why does anybody trust this guy? And so, that does sort of again, it goes against kind of the characters, but but I think that you have that in the original stories, it essentially goes to he's a bad guy, then he becomes kind of like this reluctant hero, and then he eventually becomes a hero, and then by the end of episode 6, he's now a general leading troops. He's a respected leader within the rebellion, and episode 7, I probably would have had it more, maybe politics wasn't really his game.
Mm-hmm.
And so wasn't good with that. So, and there wasn't really anybody left for him to fight against, because that was where his strength was getting out of these tight scrapes and stuff. So really the best he could do was maybe run the Rangers on the periphery or something. So I would have done something like that. Had him like as a head ranger on the outer rims or something. And then of course the only place for that character to go for development wise is kind of what they did in episode 7, which is he becomes a martyr. So by having him die right in front of Rey and Finn, the idea is he basically becomes a martyr to them, and
Right.
Willing to give your life to a cause you believe in type stuff. And so I think that as far as character growth, there's Han Solo, perfect character growth for the most part. What they should have done, I think, with Finn was we did talk about the whole battle between him and Phasma. I think that they should have had him and Phasma fight in episode 7. Finn gets his ass kicked. She wipes the floor with him. Why? Because she is the biggest badass in the First Order.
Yeah.
So
There's a reason why her armor is silver.
yeah. And episode 8, he's been training. We can have a couple of Rocky montages. You can show how he's been working out or whatever, and then he would fight her again. Except this time, he escapes.
It ends in a draw.
It's a draw, slightly in her favor. But she's still sitting there like, okay, that should have been a lot easier than it was. What the hell? And so it does kind of end with no clear victor, and she's significantly battered more than she normally would have been. And then in episode 9, you can have the Finn fight her at some point, and it's essentially the idea is here is this demon, this kind of shadow that has loomed over him most of his life, in the form of this character that made him do things he didn't want to do. And as a member of the First Order, and then as a member of the Resistance, he starts to train himself and he improves his own skill set to the point where he's now a counter to her. And he has a reason to specifically fight her, is to potentially save other kids, potentially save other orphans from being subjected to being kidnapped by the First Order or claimed by the First Order, or adopted, however they get their kids, and then raising them to be killing machines. And so you now have a moral backstory for Finn, and
where he actually gets a backbone too, because the fact of the matter is like I with Finn, I kind of got tired of the whole entire thing of like, oh, my first instinct is to run away. For episode 7, okay, I can get that. It's like you are on the run right now from the First Order. But by episode 8 and then episode 9, it's like, why is his first reaction all the time to run?
Well, episode 8, I think he wasn't running as much as he was trying to get to Rey. So he wasn't running from the situation there. But it just appeared he was running to Rose. And also that whole awkward love story thing with him and Rose was awkward. So
it was.
It seems really forced.
Well, the let's face it, the awkwardness in terms of the romance inside the episodes 7, 8, 9, you had Finn with Rose, you had the bromance of Poe and Finn, but then you also had Rey and Ben. It's like, I'm sorry, but that the kiss at the end of 9 bugged the crap out of me.
I almost exclusively think that was fan service because of all the Reylo love fan fiction stuff that was out there.
I mean, it was.
I blame, like, they went, like, it's because I was talking earlier about how you can throw something in from fan fiction. But my point was to try and find something that's better than what you have for fan fiction. don't just throw something in because you think it's going to please a certain group of fans, because
And that's what I thought what it was. It's like this is just thrown in to make somebody happy.
it very much was it was almost like softcore. Like it was just like we really don't need like the fan fiction they were pulling from.
It was contrived.
It was very contrived, but it borderlined on softcore, softcore porn. So it was just the fan fiction itself. And so to stick that into, episode 9 was kind of like, oh, that was weird, because also there was, I didn't really see
I didn't see a budding romance or a spark in between those two.
Especially since Snoke flat out said he was the one manipulating them.
Yeah.
So like that right there should have been like, oh, so there wasn't anything between us, like I had thought. It was Snoke manipulating things to try and draw us together so he could get Rey, so he can get access to Rey. And so so that's not the example of pulling from fan fiction that you want to do. If anything that goes into that erotic fan fiction, tend to stay away from that, because you're going to polarize your audience. And but also the but I was going to say with Poe, so with Finn, you have that whole story arc where he develops and basically now has a moral victory, and he can now have a moral victory over Captain Phasma. And so that establishes him as a complete story arc that's not wasted, because Finn, I think, is probably hands down the most wasted character in the series.
Yeah, would 100% agree.
And then of course when you go to you can now take Poe. So in the sense of bad guy becoming good, in the sense of Han Solo, that's Finn's story. But the swagger, the badassery, and the sheer cockiness, that character is Poe.
Yeah.
And so you can have, Poe starts out, he's the biggest pilot, best pilot they have. But then of course, episode 8, they're running into financial problems, because obviously the core of what was their funding, which was the Senate, was just blown to hell.
Yeah.
And so they, basically the First Order is self-sustaining, self-sufficient. They're not relying on the core worlds to try and run things, but so many planets have been destroyed by Starkiller Base, and then of course all the fact that those governments would now be recovering because their entire political leadership was pretty much wiped out. So now they're probably going to become very isolationist and stop financing the resistance, and even possibly pull their own troops. If you take from history, that type of stuff has happened, where when the U.S. wasn't winning against Britain during our actual during the war for independence,
Revolutionary War.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to stay on track, and I have ADD hard, so it's hard for me to try and focus these thoughts. But yeah, so in the Revolutionary War, when the U.S. wasn't winning, so prior to Valley Forge, and then of course the crossing of the Delaware, where the U.S. actually got a victory, France was basically like, you know what, guys, this isn't going well for us. We have our own problems with Britain. We're going to pull all our stuff back.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that the U.S. actually got a victory in New Jersey, in Trenton, that they actually were like, ooh, okay, well, maybe we should help this out. So you can use those same type of parallels, and that's one of the reasons I love history, because you can draw from history to tell really good science fiction stories.
Yeah.
But you could use that same kind of thought with this, where it's like everybody's now kind of becoming isolationist, like France was kind of becoming isolationist at that time. And it was kind of if you're becoming isolationist, you're not going to put your resources and your troops and stuff on the line for other people anymore. That's what NATO's for. And you don't want to be a part of that if you're isolationist. So it's kind of one of those things where if they pull everything back, so now the resistance is on their own. So this goes to the whole thing where Poe has to become a pirate. And so, but the best example of something like that was like what I had mentioned earlier, was the Privateering Act by I think it was, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Queen Elizabeth. Actually did, she basically was told her Navy people, it's like, you know what, all you people out there, you privateers, go forth. You have a writ from the Queen saying you can attack Spanish shipping legally, and the Queen just gets her cut. And she actually paid off, you know, the national debt doing that by stealing from Spain. And but it would be kind of an interesting thing if the Resistance had taken that same act, because now you can have this kind of cocky character become even more cocky, and you know, and now you can have him like certainly more swashbuckling with that the concept that he's now a pirate running operations. And that would have been a cool story for towards the end, you know, for episode 9, I think, is that you could have had the privateering, you could have had the whole growth of Rey as a character. And then of course, you know, the issues I also had with something like Luke was especially after unfortunately Carrie Fisher passed away, that really left them kind of holding, you know, kind of left them in a bad place, because it was originally supposed to be episode 7 was Han's story, episode 8 was Luke's story, episode 9 was Leia's story. Yeah. And when Leia wasn't, you know, obviously when the actress portraying Leia is not there, you can't tell that story anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, and then of course, because episode 8 was kind of disjointed, it made things even worse. You know, had you not killed off Luke and Han, like you could have got away with Luke, or you know, or you could have got away with killing Han, because obviously that was episode 7. By episode 8, we're used to it. But you had that chance. You could have had Luke be like, you know what, screw it, I'm coming out of retirement. You know, I'm going to pull off this one really awesome stunt and that force projection thing. And then, you know, maybe he does collapse, but he doesn't die, you know. And I do love Mark Hamill actually tweeted, or had, I forgot if he tweeted or mentioned it, but he said that what he really wanted to do was just, you know, he basically woke up realizing he discovered force teleportation. Unfortunately, it didn't take your clothes with you. And I just, it's like, that would be brilliant. Like Luke Skywalker just suddenly appears on another planet, bare ass naked, going, well, that wasn't what I was planning. And you know.
It's like what you just said. It's like in terms of like episode 7 being Han Solo's, it's like it being Han's story, episode 8 being Luke's story, and episode 9 being the final chapter in Leia's story. It does make sense, because I felt that in the scene between, like, Rey had just left Kylo on, it's like on Endor at the Death Star, and there's this huge, all this water's crashing around, and you know, Ben throws his lightsaber into the ocean essentially, and then Han Solo says something, and they have this like kind of like talk and feeling, it's like, you know, talk about their feelings essentially. It's like they have a heart to heart. I always kind of thought that was supposed to be meant for Leia. I kind of felt that was supposed to be the conversation that Ben was supposed to have with his mom, as opposed to with his dad.
Yeah, I honestly, I didn't have a problem with them killing Han Solo the way they did. Mm-hmm. You know, my problem is when you become a martyr, or when a character becomes a martyr, follow through with it.
Yeah.
You know, so good example, remember the Alamo. You know, nobody in episode 8 or 9 was yelling for Han and then, you know, going out and doing anything. And I think that something like that would have really helped the story as well. And you know, but I think that going back to our point earlier, because I know we tend to rabbit trail, or at least I do a lot. I apologize for that, but this is why I have notebooks and stuff. I write down exactly like all my thoughts as I'm having them, and I don't have a notebook in front of me, so I forgot that. last time I had little notes I could write it down. I could stay focused. But yeah, it's. I think that if Dave Filoni was creative director or the senior, the basically the chief creative officer of Lucasfilm, I think he would be the person to think of stuff like this.
Yeah.
You know, and, well, you know, I want to do this thing because you know you think of, I don't want to say Disney in general, but you know, because we often talk about how, like, you know, they marketed Captain Marvel as not Captain Marvel, awesome MCU, you know, character, you know, a new MCU character or a great MCU movie, anything. It was marketed as a female superhero movie. And that's actually my biggest problem with Captain Marvel, is it was marketed as a project that was exclusively made to fulfill the wants and desires of a specific type of audience. And what I really think that they should have done was Wonder Woman, where they created a superhero movie that fit within, you know, the overall MCU, you know, would have fit, well, it had been an MCU movie, obviously, that fits within their cinematic universe. And it just happens to be a strong female character. And because I think that if you're constantly having to remind your audience that you're doing something,
it takes away from the story.
It not just takes away from the story, but also takes away from what you're doing. So, you know, it was one of the reasons why Buffy the Vampire Slayer was so awesome. It wasn't until Buffy the Vampire Slayer had been off the air that somebody had actually come up to me one day and said, you know, it's like, did you like Buffy? It's like, I love Buffy. I thought it was freaking awesome. And they're like, you know, that was the first time a female lead, you know, was presented in kind of like this. I forgot what the exact terminology was, but it was basically the first time anybody had done something where it was a strong female character was the dominant force in everything. Because even Wonder Woman with Linda Carter, she was constantly being saved by Steve Trevor, or somebody else would save her. You know, some man would come along and be like, ha, 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 you know, here I am to save the day, and they would go Mighty Mouse. But Wonder Woman didn't have that. You know, Wonder Woman, again, and I use that as an example a lot because I think it's probably the best example I've ever seen. When she is climbing, when she's in the trenches, and she's like, that town is in trouble, innocent people are dying, we have to do something, and they go, we can't, nobody can get across that, you know. And you know, it's like, anybody who goes out there is going to die, there's nothing we can do. And she's like, somebody has to do something. And you know, even, you know, they do mention it's called No Man's Land. I didn't have a problem with that because it was literally called No Man's Land. And they didn't beat me over the head with it. So, you know, and so I was like, you know, that's No Man's Land. You can't go out there. Nobody can. And so she's like, well, somebody has to do something. So here is a woman, an Amazonian, who had, you know, fairly new to the world. And the last time she saw Nazis this close, she watched her fellow Amazonians get mowed down because their weapons were so efficient against the, you know, the armor and stuff that the Amazonians were wearing. And so she watched her friends die. And so she gets up and runs headlong into a machine gun with her shield. And the reason I think that that's an important part of the movie, and then of course she just goes full beast mode and wipes out the town of all the Nazis and saves all the people. So the reason I like that is because that is a moment where, as far as she knows, she is absolutely mortal. And there is every possibility, you know, significant possibility that she will die trying to do what she's trying to do to help these people. And so she's putting it all on the line. She doesn't know at that point that she's a freaking god. So, you know, again, she just watched everybody like her die at the hands of these weapons. So she's going out there anticipating that she could die doing it. And that is a strong female. That is a strong, courageous character who happened to be female. And so that's why I think I love watching that scene over and over and over again, because to me, that's kind of like the awakening. That's when she becomes Wonder Woman. And then of course, later on in the movie, when she's fighting Ares, when I watched it in the theater, it was funny because she's like, calling down lightning bolts and punching Ares and throwing them across the flight the airbase or whatnot. And there's just this massive just CGI brawl fest. There's a lady in the back of the theater who screams out, "That's a strong woman!" And I'm sitting there thinking, no, that's a god. Earlier, when she thought she was going to die, she was a strong woman. Now her character knows she's a god. So, and I think that is, and that's from a storytelling standpoint. Obviously, Wonder Woman's a very strong, powerful character for females. But I love that it wasn't pounded over my head. Whereas with Captain Marvel, it sort of was. Every 15 minutes or 10 minutes, they're saying something about how they're girls and, it's called a cockpit for a reason. Or, there's some mention as to why women shouldn't be allowed to do something. And they're trying to not do that. So I feel like I'm being reminded throughout that entire movie. Now, fast forward that to its relationship with DC, not DC, but with Disney, is periodically you do get these projects where they have marketing comes in and says, well, we really need a movie with a strong character or an Asian character or this, or we have our checklist of demographics of specific audiences we want to make happy. Now, kind of the cool thing with Star Wars is, it's a science fiction that takes place in deep space. You can fill up most of your cast with purple people and nobody's going to care.
Yep.
You can fill up your cast with people who have, tusks and, just like 6 arms and, 6 breasts. Like that lady from Return of the Jedi who traumatized me as a child. But you can have all these various differential, type characters, and then you kind of bring in characters like Rose or like Finn or something like that who might fit a criteria off that marketing checklist. The key thing is you have those characters in there and you tell a good story. And I think they did that really. And I think, like I said, the best example of that is Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kind of a weak example of that, I don't want to say bad, but definitely a weak example of that would be Captain Marvel. With Star Wars, I think Episode 7 was a good example. Finn was a very powerful character. Rey was possibly too powerful of a character, but I think it would have been better, rather than kind of with the Mary Sue complaint, if they had actually given more of a backstory as to why she was so powerful, and why it was, again, why the Force was awakening. So I think that, and those were missed opportunities in Episode 8 and 9, because those character, her character was just always a badass. So much so that evidently the entire galaxy and the best pilot in the universe needed her help for everything they do. I couldn't get the pickles open this morning, Ray. Where were you? So and that was, and I think that Episode 7 was a good example of how you can tell a story, checking off those marketing, desires for creating content for specific audiences that would appreciate it. Whereas Episode 8 and 9 are kind of weaker examples. So I know that was really long and drawn out, but I wanted to...
No worries.
It's a touchy subject, and if you only abbreviate it, somebody's going to be like, "You said a bad thing. I'm never going to watch your stuff again." And yeah, but I do think that you can create amazing content and check off those marketing things, and I guarantee you, Dave Filoni is capable of that. Please make Dave Filoni the chief creative officer.
And well, in terms of, it's like we're talking about story, and one of the things that it's kind of, to bring it back, is literally
because I took it way out there.
And I'm gonna kind of go back. This is gonna sound like a rubber band, but I kind of want some older stories, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah,
like
nice little Republic.
Yeah, cold. It's like something KOTOR based, or even before then. Like, give us, or it's like, tell the story about like the first Jedi and the first Sith.
It's an awesome comic book series by Dark Horse called Tales of the Jedi. And keep in mind, one of the things that I don't want to say I'm upset about it now, but it upset me at the time, was when Marvel announced that they were taking over the Star Wars comics, I was very upset. Like, I actually yelled, I think, at one point. And it was because if you think back to the history of Star Wars as a franchise, after Return of the Jedi, it was done. They weren't doing anything with it. And then, of course, Dark Horse was like, and the Marvel comics weren't doing very well. That Jackson character just really pissed some people off. The space rabbit, if anybody's curious.
Yeah.
Basically, it was a gun-toting space rabbit. It's the rabbit version of Rocket Raccoon. And in Star Wars. And essentially, it was just it was a weird story. The stuff that was adapted from the movies was close to the movies, but then there was just other stuff in there and the fans didn't really respond to it that well. But then Dark Horse comes along and says, we've got these really cool ideas for other story. Can we do those? And then also, the Timothy Zahn novels came out. And those were very successful. And then, of course, Dark Horse is like, can we adapt those as comic books as well to give them visual? And so to me, Dark Horse and their work on Star Wars and how well they handled that property, because there were very few comic books released by Dark Horse for Star Wars that were bad. Like everything, I mean, they pretty much kept really good quality control on that. And when they announced Marvel was taking it over and that they were throwing it away as expanded universe, or not throwing it away, but they were relegating it to they were getting rid of the expanded universe and relegating this to Legends. I was really upset because, in my opinion, Dark Horse comics saved Star Wars as a franchise. So episodes 1, 2, and 3 never would have been made had it not been for Dark Horse Comics keeping the franchise alive with new content month after month after month after month with all those comic books they were putting out. But yeah, and I would love to see some stories go back to the expanded universe, go back to those Dark Horse comics, and do some of the Tales of the Jedi stuff. Talk about the origin of the Jedi holocrons.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Like, I think that would be amazing because that content is there. The stories are already fleshed out. Yeah. Refine them and release them as movies. What do you guys think of the anthology movies? Because I loved Rogue One and Solo.
I enjoyed the heck out of them. I was really looking forward to, what they had else set with Obi-Wan and stuff like that. I was really hoping that they were going to continue to do it. But I'm okay at the fact that they're doing it in a TV series, because instead of a 2.5-hour movie, I get 6 hours long. So, I get double the content. But I love the Star Wars stories. I mean, I thought they were great tie-ins to kind of fill in some gaps and stuff like that, though Rogue One was basically the crawl of episode 4, which I thought was kind of a brilliant idea. And, just a great concept. And then, with Solo, I mean,
they need to edit that really fast. They need to do a 2-movie edit of Rogue One leading into episode 4, where it's just basically you watch Rogue One, it ends, and instead of the crawl for episode 4, it's just 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
I mean, there are. It's like there is the potential to do that.
That was one of the things that really got me too. The crawl at the beginning of the movie, and I'm like, guys, it is the crawl. Like, really, it's kind of double negative there. You're having a crawl with the crawl, huh? But no, I love those. I love that they did that, and it'd be kind of cool for them to have a continuation of that, but do earlier stories. Is what I would really love to see. Is I would love to see, Darth Plagueis. I'd love to see the story of Darth Plagueis. I'd love to see, Dooku before he became a Sith, and what drove him to become, Count Dooku or Darth Tyrannus. Sorry, and all of that stuff. I think those would be some really fun stories to see. That would tie into the prequels and really kind of catch everybody's attention because we know who these characters are because we heard them in the movies, but we don't know their backstory. It'd be kind of cool to get their backstory and to see where it kind of all falls in. Like I'd love to see where, why the the Jedi felt like we needed to have a clone army, and all that stuff.
Technically that part was covered. It's because remember,
yeah, but I'd like to see
what
led up to that.
Until they were like, we ordered what from Amazon?
Yeah, right. So I think you could. I mean, there's so many stories that they can tell. I mean, Star Wars is such a rich, vast universe that has so many untold stories of the stuff that we have, even with what we had in Legends, what they call it. You still have it's the great thing about Star Wars. You can tell stories till your face turns blue, man. I mean, there's just so much content that's not out there that could be out there. And I mean, dude, I'm one of my dream movies is coming out in a couple years with the Rogue Squadron, man.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to see a freaking movie about Rogue Squadron, just how badass those guys are. It really, really is something to be told, because I mean, you've got there's so many different things. Like shit, dude, give me a Rise of the Empire. Give me a movie about the Rise of the Empire.
Kind of what I was talking about earlier with familiarity, that's kind of also where you end up with Rogue One, because you had they had Darth Vader at the end there for a certain level of familiarity. You also had Mon Mothma for that little bit of familiarity. Obviously the ships and the design of everything. Pretty much an all new cast. But one thing that they did have that I really liked about it was, and also the Death Star and whatnot. But I'm trying to think of what was it. It was like the whole world, the design and the feel of it was very familiar. And I think that using so much of that from the original shows and stuff goes to that level of familiarity. But there was something you mentioned that I'm trying to remember what it was. That I kind of lost my thought a little bit because I rabbit trailed. But but no, but that was one of the things about Rogue One is that love. It was actually you were talking about Rogue Squadron. Was the idea that they actually used the footage in Rogue One for the stuff that was deleted from Episode 4.
Yeah. So
Episode 4, when they attack the Death Star at the very end, and they have the various Red Squadron pilots talking to each other, and then of course they also had a Red 5 pilot who gets killed, which is why the Red 5 designation was available when Luke joins.
Right.
It's like, we need someone to fill in this spot.
It was great because they're like, hey, we have a jersey available.
Yeah, right.
Join the team. But it was one of those, but it goes to that familiarity that I was talking about earlier. And I love that, it goes to that idea of you can do things being subtle and not beat people over the head with it, because they stuck in that footage from 40 freaking years ago of the various pilots talking to each other, created a couple of new ones, obviously, to make the interaction genuine.
Yeah.
And of course, killed Red 5. Poor guy. Yeah. But, our thoughts go with his family. But it was, I love that. I just thought that was a great nod. It's for me, it's one of those things where people always bitch about fan service. It's like, oh, this is just too much fan service. It's like, if it's not fan service, if it pushes the story along, if it fills a gap in a story, or if it allows for character growth, that's not fan service. That's a well-told story. And I really hope that now with Disney Plus, and especially with the success of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, that Disney will let, with any luck, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau give it the MCU treatment.
Yeah.
I want Dave Filoni to become the Kevin Feige of Star Wars.
Yep.
I want him to helm, these, I want 3 Star Wars movies a year, and a new Star Wars TV show, pretty much every week with a couple of weeks gaps here and there between each of the miniseries and stuff like that. The way they're doing MCU, so that I have something new pretty much every week to watch.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
And I'm very happy with that.
Yeah. And I want it all to tie in together.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the MCU is, on the occasions that they make missteps, they just step over the hole and keep going. Like it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, we won't mention the fact that we kind of blew it with the whole shield joke. The what are we going to call the strategic homeland intervention, thing. In the first Iron Man movie, they weren't called shield, they were called the strategic homeland intervention blah blah blah, blah, blah department and logistics department. I forgot what the E was for, but logistics department or something like that. So it was just this long title, and then finally at the end of the movie he's like, oh yeah, just call us shield. But then they go back in time and they're like, hi, we're shield. And for Captain Marvel, it's like, hi, I'm Nick Fury of shield. And so they kind of just retcon it in the story arc. It's like, yeah, and they just don't mention it, and I'm okay with that. But I'm also I would be really okay if they just now that they have a direction for Star Wars as far as the stories and stuff go, I would not mind if they kind of retcon 7, 8, 9. I do not have a problem at all of them wiping the slate clean and just do new 7, 8, and 9s that meet with the same
It's like, yeah,
and criteria that they're putting into these television shows.
Yeah.
As much as I spoke against doing that earlier, because those 3 movies don't have a continuing story arc. And even worse, the biggest failure, I think, of 7, 8, 9 is the death of the Skywalker line.
Yeah.
The reason is because we had talked earlier about how Dark Empire and a lot of the stuff, the comics and things that Dark Horse had done, and even the books by Timothy Zahn were so amazing. There's this great pool of resource material out there, one of which that has not been tapped yet in the films or is even mentioned on anything is the Star Wars Legacy, which has Cade Skywalker 135 years in the future. He's well on his way to he's kind of like the Michael Vick of Jedi. They're just kind of like, yeah, we don't really want to admit we know that guy.
Yeah.
And he's trying to run from his legacy. He doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be a Jedi. He doesn't want to be like a Skywalker.
He's a great smuggler, though.
Oh yeah.
And he takes after great his great uncle. But he takes after he has a lot of those smuggling traits from Han's side of the family, I guess. So, I won't go into how Han and Luke Skywalker had a child together, but he does have a lot of that type of that great Han Solo character traits, in his character, and I always thought that was great. But in particular, they also had Darth Krayt. Darth Krayt is an amazing character who's lived hundreds of years. And he's actually alive in the time of Luke, and actually fought at one point with Obi-Wan, and so I think that on Tatooine. So let's hope we get that in the Obi-Wan story, where he's actually still a Jedi in hiding, living with the Tuscans, and then of course he creates one Sith, throws away the rule of 2 Sith Lords. And one Sith basically is an army of Sith Lords. And it's like, holy shit, how do you, defend or fight against that? You talk about imbalance in the Force. So I just thought that was a great, great concept. And then, of course, you also have the best of all of them. You have Darth Nihilus, as well as
Darth Nihilus.
Darth
Nihilus and Darth Talon. 2 of the best Sith Lord characters ever are in that group. And I would love to see them brought into the cinematic universe, the Star Wars.
Oh my gosh.
So, but again, because Episode 9 killed the Skywalker line off, it kills that potential for that story material. Now, that's not to say they couldn't Dave Filoni it and shoehorn them in somewhere where they actually fit. I don't mean shoehorn as in cram it in like they do most things, or most studios do, but
they can reincorporate it into what is considered canon today.
Yeah, effectively, and tell a good story at the same time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think at this point in time, we need to conclude our conversation until further. It's like, and you know, it's like probably we'll come back and circle around when we all finish up the Bad Batch, and we'll have more
talk at some point about DCU and versus the MCU.
Oh,
absolutely.
We'll definitely do that. We'll definitely do that episode because I know that
from a storytelling standpoint,
from a story, it's like I have my own personal standpoint on that. I'm pretty sure that, like, I mean, I think I've had conversations with the both of you in regards to how that goes. But yeah, no, it's like if we can, I would very much enjoy a conversation of that nature. But until then, my name's Brendan. That's been Shane. That's been Lee. Thank you again, Lee, for joining us for this Star Wars conversation for May the 4th. So May the 4th be with you on that day. I look forward to
you as well.
I look forward to, I'm pretty sure, because you're streaming on that day, I believe.
And ironically, I'll be drawing Jimi Hendrix that day. I'm doing a charity guitar for
nice.
a charity called Artreach. And so last year I drew on an Eddie Van Halen designed guitar, but I drew Grogu. I painted him in gouache, and this year I'm actually going to do a pen and ink drawing on a pearlescent Fender 65 Stratocaster. It's going to be a Voodoo Child themed guitar with.
Oh my god!
So but I've been practicing the inking style and stuff on it. So, but we'll probably be drawing that Tuesday on my stream.
Nice.
So it's by the way, that's actually I don't know if that's visible up there, but
well, it's if it's not visible behind you, it is visible to the right of you.
But that's for charity. And the one last year sold really well, and this year they actually hunted me down and asked me, because originally I was told them I'm too busy, I'm not gonna be able to do it. And they're like, no, if it takes you longer, don't worry. Just we really want you to do it. So I was really kind of jazzed that they specifically asked me.
Aww.
But it's for a great charity. It raises money to buy art supplies for underprivileged kids that otherwise wouldn't have access to art in school, any kind of like art classes or any kind of art supplies. So
cool.
That's awesome.
And it helps develop community art projects for kids as well.
Nice.
All right, but until then, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure as always, and we'll see you the next time at the round table. Have a good night, gentlemen. We'll catch you all later, and all of you have a fantastic day. What's up, nerds? My name is Brendan, the nerd of many faces.
And I'm Shane, FDScosplay, and we are the Knights of Nerd.
Now, you may have noticed that there has been a slight delay in the release of this episode. That's because you can now find us on Outlet.
Yep, that's right, Brandon. You can catch us on Outlet with so many other great shows like Con Girls Next Door, Adventures with Pablo, Topics on Tap, and many other independently produced shows. So come and check us out, check them out, and have some great conversations.
And if you like what we're doing, go ahead and leave us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, or leave a comment down below. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at the round table.